Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this week's ASO at Home. Our really interesting topic, I know that many of you have been waiting for, our new music endeavors and melding genres. This evening, we have four of our amazing musicians with us today, spanning many different sections of the orchestra. So I will get to introducing them here in just a moment. Just a few things as we get going. As the evening proceeds, if you would like to ask any questions to any of the musicians, please feel free to post them in the Q&A section or in the chat section, whichever you prefer. And I will get to them as we have time. And if you have any questions for just one musician, please feel free to address them and they will answer them as they can. All right, well, thank you to all of our panel for joining us. Let's go ahead and get started. I'm gonna go ahead and pick on Will. If you'll go ahead and introduce yourself first, just let everybody know what instrument you play in the orchestra, maybe what other instruments you play outside of the Asheville Symphony, how long you've been with the orchestra, and anything you'd like our viewers to know about you.
Well, hi, I'm Will Peebles. I play contrabassoon with the symphony, also sometimes bassoon, depending on what the parts require. I guess I started playing with Asheville in 1992 when I came down to North Carolina to take a job teaching bassoon and music theory at Western Carolina University. So bassoon and contrabassoon are my main two things. So I always tell people, you know, if I get reincarnated, I'm going to pick something lighter. So easier to carry around than contrabassoon. So I ended up getting involved with gamelan, which is not lighter than contrabassoon. It's an Indonesian percussion orchestra. We've got a couple different types now at the university, and I guess that's why I got asked to be on this panel tonight. So I'm going to talk more about that later on.
Yes, well, we're looking forward to it for sure. Let's go ahead and move on to Rosalind.
Fabulous. Hello, I'm Rosalind Buda, and I also play bassoon in the Asheville Symphony. I've been a pretty regular substitute with the orchestra since I moved to Asheville in 2011. So sometimes I get to play with Will right next to him. It's really great to hear the rumbles of the contrabassoon.
So you live here in Asheville then, Rosalind?
I do, yes.
Wonderful, awesome. It's
yes,
always nice when we have some few people that are actually from Asheville from the orchestra. That's always lovely. So
I know we're also very regional, but yes, I live in Asheville, and I'm always thrilled when I get the call to come play with the orchestra. Usually it's a couple times a year. When there's extra instrumentation, or being a substitute means like if one of the regular principal players is out of town for any reason, I could be called to come and play that concert. So I've enjoyed doing that in all my time in Asheville. I'm primarily a classical bassoon player, playing orchestral music and chamber music. And I'm also a Celtic musician. So I play multiple kinds of bagpipes. I play Great Highland bagpipes, Scottish small pipes, and I've played medieval bagpipes and early wind instruments as well, like the, oh gosh, what's a, I play recorder and sometimes crumhorn or other cap double reed instruments, but mostly I think the Celtic angle is kind of my angle this evening. Playing Scottish, Irish, Breton, Welsh, and Appalachian traditional music on bagpipes and whistle. And I have a duo outside of classical music with my musical partner, Kelly Brzezowski, who plays lever harp, Celtic harp.
Oh my gosh. Well, there's a lot to delve in there. We will certainly get back to all of that as well. Thanks, Rosalind. Next, let's go to Stephanie.
Hi, everybody. I'm Stephanie Quinn. And my multi-genre story, I realized when I got the last minute notice to come here today, begins and ends in Asheville, which is kind of interesting. I live in Asheville. I've been here about 6 years, and I sometimes play in the symphony, as we were hearing from Rosalind, in a similar type of basis. I'm always thrilled to come because it's just 10 minutes away, and love playing with the group. It's such a happy atmosphere, which is a big change from the big cities that I've lived in the past. I spend a lot of my time teaching and performing, and I've been doing a lot of cross-genre work with the quartet and trio, and many times I have to arrange, let's say, a pop cover or a country western song and arrange it for quartet or trio. So I do a good amount of different genres that way, and of course with a name like Quinn, I know about 200 Celtic Irish Irish fiddle songs. So I also enjoy doing that. I was also spent some time in Israel and Egypt, and that Middle Eastern certainly had an influence on me as well as with my compositions. I'm also a composer.
Oh, wow. Quite an Afro musician. Wonderful. Thanks, Stephanie. I have a feeling that Celtic music is going to be a little bit of a theme this evening. So that brings us to Emmalee. Can you go ahead and give us a little introduction?
Yeah, I'm Emmalee Hunnicutt. I live in Asheville. I've been subbing with Asheville Symphony since 2015 as a cellist. So my primary instrument is cello. I also play guitar and sing. I do some Celtic music, some Appalachian ballad singing, and I also am a part of an improv trio, does more experimental music, and also more recently I've been working with my partner who he's been writing some microtonal music. So I've been learning just intonation pieces with him, which has been really fun and eye and mind opening. So glad to be here with everyone.
Awesome. Thanks, Emmalee. I appreciate it. So to go ahead and get the fun started, the first question that I want to ask everybody, and you all can answer in whatever order and let the conversation go, but how did you really just start to get into music? Kind of what were the things that inspired you? I know myself as a musician, there's obviously very specific things that I can think of in my childhood, for example, that impacted what type of music I was interested in, what music, instruments, etc., and kind of what drove me to become a musician. And I just kind of want to hear that story from some of you as the foundation for obviously what we're going to get into as the talk goes on. Anybody? Am I going to call on somebody?
We all know how to read rests in music.
Yes.
The rest. We're waiting for someone else to enter.
I'll jump in. As a child, I was fascinated with sounds. And my mother would drive me in the car, and I'd look at the telephone wires, and I was taking music lessons at a young age. I'd look at the telephone wires, and I'd imagine the birds were musical notes on there, and I could hear all those notes because they had pitch. Wow. And I was playing around with that. I was also very much into time. And I had my schedule from the time I was about fourth grade incremented in 15-minute time slots and so forth. So when my teacher said practice 3 hours a day, I knew exactly how I was going to get it all done.
Oh, I'm sure that was very productive.
But by the way, I'm a violinist. I'm a violinist and a pianist. So that's 3 hours between the two instruments.
Oh, wow. That does seem to be a thing, a trend, I would say, between musicians is some obsession with time, some understanding of that, with the fact that our art is something that comes and goes with time. It's not something that's permanent. You know what I mean? So thanks, Stephanie. All right, Emmalee, I'm going to pick on you.
Well, I grew up with my parents singing a lot. They both sing. They met in high school in kind of like the show choir of their high school. So that's sort of the foundation of who I am is their love of music and singing. And so I grew up just hearing a lot of music, and they invited me to take piano lessons when I was really young. And then I saw someone playing cello and I was really intrigued. And so I had this little toy guitar at home that I started playing with a ladle like a cello. And so my parents were like, okay, we'll get you, we'll give you some cello lessons. So I think I just loved the tone and the sound of the cello. So that's some of my foundational inspiration.
I'm sure that's a nice, sweet memory.
Mm-hmm.
Something to tell your kids one day.
Yeah.
All right, Will, you're next.
My mother was an amateur flute player. So memories is waking up from nap, my brother and me, and we'd hear mom practicing, because the only time she could practice was when we were asleep. So, and she liked to play some of the Bach flute sonatas. And so I still remember those that she had played. Her mother's father, her mother's half brother was Vern Powell, who was one of the most famous flute makers in the country up in Boston.
Oh,
So
wow.
we grew up with that. My folks both liked classical music and folk music, so we listened to those records. And then when it got to be middle school and time to get involved with band, it just seemed like a natural thing. So I started out playing clarinet, was doing some things wrong on it, and the girl who was second chair kept challenging me all the time, and I discovered that bassoon was not only weird and different, but there was nobody else playing it, so nobody was going to challenge for chairs. So I made the switch.
The story about how people come into bassoons, they always surprise me. They're all so very different. It's such a difficult instrument. Oh, thanks, Will. All right, Rosalind, you last.
Oh, that's great. Oh, I love that. I can tell how I came into the bassoon story as well, but I'll mention first that I had a very musical household as a child. My mother is a soprano and was involved in all kinds of choral music and still is. And we would have beautiful church music. We had an eccentric choir director at our church who encouraged recorder ensembles and things with guitar and djembe and all kinds of different sounds. And I had the opportunity to sing in a children's chorus in Des Moines, Iowa, right near where I grew up. Emmalee and I have an Iowa connection. We could mention that later. But so I sang a lot as a child. I had great opportunities in music. My mother got my brother and I involved in Des Moines Metro Opera, where we got to sing in the on-stage chorus for La Boheme and other Puccini operas that they did there. It was we did Tosca. It was fantastic. And I did every single musical offering that was available at my school. And it was just one of my greatest joys. We listened to lots of music. I think the Celtic connection, I always had an affinity for that music. We had a recording of the Edinburgh Military Tattoo Pipes and Drums album. And I would listen to that and dance and run around to it. It was one of the most magical memories, listening to that kind of music. And I always enjoyed drones. So that sound, that constant hum. So things that would make a drone in our home, like the convection oven or the refrigerator or the vacuum cleaner. I'm not sure if I told my mom that. She's actually listening right now, I think. That I would hum along with those things. So it would create that bass tone, and I would sing a melody of my own design, usually along with the oven or the refrigerator or whatever might be humming. And I just loved it. So I had the opportunity to learn bagpipes when I was in high school and jumped at the opportunity. I had always wanted to learn and tried to teach myself, but that is a very challenging instrument to teach oneself. So I got into it when my high school band director wanted to learn to play bagpipes and brought in an instructor to our school. And he asked if anyone else wanted to learn for free. It was amazing. I think I levitated out of my chair with my arm in the air, saying, yes, I want to do it. I was always the kid in band that wanted to play all the other wind instruments. I just had such an affinity for the wind instruments. I played clarinet first and wanted to play my brother's flute for fun, and wanted to play the alto clarinet because it was different. And they had them in my band room. If anyone that plays clarinet knows that it's a terrible instrument, you shouldn't play it. It's a sort of a novelty, but I came upon the bassoon at the end of my 8th grade year because I was rooting around in our band storage room where they kept all these cases and smashed sousaphones and oddments and bits and of stuff from broken band instruments. And I saw this long rectangular case in the back, and I pulled it out and I opened it up. And I said, "It's a bassoon." Being the nerd that I was, I knew it was a bassoon. And I immediately asked my band director if I could please take it home and try it. And they were like, "Good luck, kid. No one's played that in 25 years or so, you know." But I took it home, figured out how to put it together, and fell in love. So that was my bassoon journey.
That is a good history. Loved it ever since. Were you able to play it?
I was there. This sounds so disgusting, but there was a reed in the case that had been there for a while. But I think that it was untouched. It was in a little plastic case. And I took it out and I put it in some water and soaked it. And after doing the jigsaw puzzle that is the bassoon, it only goes together one way. But let me tell you, you try to put it together like 10 other ways before you figure out the one way. I got it together and put the reed on and made a sound. And I thought that I had made, by the end of the evening, that I probably wasn't, but in my own mind, I was playing the beginning of The Sorcerer's Apprentice.
Oh my God.
An approximation, I'm sure, but I was just thrilled with it. And
hey, who cares? Yeah, you ended up playing it for the rest of your life, so it meant something, right?
Right.
Well, Rosalind, you kind of touched on this a little bit that I wanted to get to, and that is obviously, as you all stated, that most musicians do in this country start off learning classical music, learning that's how we learn the foundation of music, right? And just kind of talk to me a little bit about what that transition was like for you. I know a lot of you mentioned that you do dabble in other genres and kind of more what we'd even say experimental music. I know you do, Emmalee, and just kind of what drew you to that, what kind of for you was like, I need to go in a different direction here, or explore something different? Or was that always a part of it? Was that there from the very beginning of playing music?
I guess I'll jump in.
Yeah, okay.
On that. For me, I was introduced to genre mixing in New York through my association with Paul Winter. He taught me how to improvise. And that was a gateway to many, many explorations. And he was mixing species as he invited the humpback whales and coyote or eagles and wolves into his music. So all of that really blew my mind, and I got very interested in it. And then around that time, I went to Israel to bring Palestinians and Jews together in my workshops using common tones. I found some commonality between it. And while I was there, I'd be invited to go out and play with a Jewish band. And then when I was finished for the night, I'd say, would any of you like to play music with a Palestinian band? Wow. And I'd grab those numbers, and then I'd go to that side and vice versa. So every time I went out, I was either doing Arabic music or Hebrew music, and they are quite different. So then when I went back to New York, and then it was Philip Glass, it was Dharma Bums, all kinds of music. And then by the time I got to Egypt, I was just full of ideas. So that's kind of how it started with me. I think some of what I was doing might be classified as world music. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What drew you to that culture, to that part of the world?
What?
I said, what drew you to that part of the world? What kind of drew you to
well, it's two things. The Field Museum in Chicago has a mummy, and every time I went there, I'd run to the basement to see the mummy. So I was fascinated with Egyptian. And as a child, I thought I looked Egyptian, even though I had light skin. I would look in the mirror and go, "Who's that?" It's just kind of strange. But the Israel thing was, I started working with tones and toning and overtone singing. And I had this idea to bring people together this way. And I was doing workshops in this, song circles. And then I scratched my head and said, who hates each other more than anybody? Where's the biggest conflict? Let's go and try this out. Let's try this out. And that's why I went to Israel. And I went back several times. And the Egypt. I don't want to take up too much time, but
no, that's beautiful.
The Egypt came as a result of that, and then by chance I wound up inside the Great Pyramid by myself.
Wow,
Yeah.
that is really beautiful. I'm just like glad that that theme came up about that commonality that we all can share, you know, and that music can bring so many people together that maybe have complete differences or even hatred between them. So I definitely want to talk about that a little bit more. I think that's beautiful.
That's the theme of the album. It's all about, you know, people that coming from different places coming together and finding that commonality. That's the whole theme of it.
Wonderful. And I'll get to this at the end, but and I didn't mention at the beginning, but for those of you on the call today that would like to hear any more of what the musicians are talking about this evening, I'll leave my email in the chat so that you can reach out to me and I can connect you with them. I'm sure that many of our viewers would love to hear that album or hear some of this music that we're all kind of talking about. So we'll get to that at the end. Thanks, Stephanie. Let's move on to Emmalee.
Yeah, so I was really inspired to start improvising when I was in college. Just being around folks that were composing and inviting more sort of experimenting with sound. So I started doing that on my own, sort of writing my own stuff. I have a looping pedal. I saw someone mention Zoe Keating on the Q&A. So I started doing some looping pedal, cello, improv, yeah, I just felt sort of like I wanted to go beyond the bounds of classical music, which maybe a lot of people experience, feeling like, you know, I've played all of these other composers' pieces for so long. What is my own voice like? So really exploring my own voice was what started me transitioning into doing more improvised stuff. And as far as getting into Celtic and folk music, that's just been intriguing to me. Like since I learned how to play guitar in high school, I wanted to explore with my voice, explore singing, and learned a bunch of folk songs, and just loved that and loved the culture around that. And so yeah, that covers most of my transitional experience.
I'm sure Ben has something to do with your recent endeavors, which we will get to here shortly as well. So
yeah.
Lovely. All right, and last, Will.
Well, I had heard gamelan when I was a couple of times when I was a kid. The University of Michigan had a gamelan that came up a couple of times and did performances of the wayang plays. And in Michigan, when you do an all-night gamelan outdoor program, you have to start pretty late. So it was a way of staying up late, listening to music. But I didn't really have a chance to do anything with it or really think much more about ever doing with it until I came down to Western. I was interested in possibly starting a world music class since we didn't have a course like that on the books. And so I did a workshop in the College Music Society in California, and that was a hands-on workshop. So we got to play gamelan, we got to do some African drumming and dancing, which I was horrible at. But sitting down playing something was not so bad. So gamelan worked out pretty well. And then one of my colleagues I was in my office working one evening, and he came in and said, "Hey, you got to check this eBay thing out." So okay, fine. And so we were looking for silly things that are available on eBay. And, so he types in submarine, and there were a couple of them. Decommissioned Russian submarine, would make a good restaurant or something, So I thought, well, what's the most outlandish thing somebody might be selling? So I typed in gamelan, and one thing came up, and it was a gamelan. in Santa Cruz, California, that a fellow was getting rid of. So I contacted the fellow, and he said, well, you can contact Lou Harrison, who is one of the big name gamelan people in the US. I very shyly emailed him to get his assessment of that gamelan. I ended up getting it, getting the instrument, flew out to California, rented a truck, brought it back. And what I really enjoyed about that is it doesn't take normal notation. And it's very much about layering and interlocking your part with other parts in a way that we don't typically do in the orchestra so much. And that layering has attracted Western musicians like Debussy and Ravel, and some of their music, they've explored those concepts. But for me, I found it a new way of listening, which then also I hope made me a better listener as far as how I fit into the orchestra when I'm playing classical music.
Mm. And Will, and real quick while we're speaking, Will, and then I'll get to you, Rosalind, and that you might want to chime in on this as well. John Condren just asked a question: are there different types of contrabassoon? I've seen the bent, folded over type, and a 10-foot long linear type. Are those the same thing? And is the contrabassoon the lowest instrument in the orchestra?
The piano can go one step lower. So the lowest note on most contras is the low B flat that's at the left-hand end of the piano keyboard. Piano goes down to A, and some contrabassoons have an extra extension that go down to A. Most of them are bent over for playing in an orchestra pit or something. Some of the older ones stick way up in the air. And then some of them have a short bell when they only have to go down to C. And then the early ones, you see some pictures of those that actually were 8 or 9 feet long and played like a bassoon, but just a really, really long bassoon. Unfortunately, that idea bit the dust in the middle of the 19th century when they started folding it over a few more times and made it much more portable and much easier to deal with.
I'm astonished about that lowest note thing. Let me play it so y'all can hear it.
Oh yeah, good idea. I wish I had. It's low.
I mean, really.
It gets down to where it starts to be hard to distinguish the pitches. So I think a lot of times when we play down in that range, we're actually playing off of the harmonics an octave or 2 octaves higher to hear how we fit with everybody else.
I mean, how often is it that you have to play that low?
Oh, there's some good spots. Yeah. I mean, Haydn did this with the low B flat in The Creation, which was 1809. And the choir is singing about all the different animals that the Lord has created. And he mentions the ponderous beast in the English translation. And the contrabassoon plays a big low B flat forte for 2 measures. He's going, bah! And the first time I got to do this in an orchestra, everybody turned around. It's like, you maniac, what the heck are you doing there? It's like, it's in the part. It was Haydn's joke.
That's hilarious. Rosalind, have you ever had that experience? Did you ever have to play that?
I have not played contrabassoon in that piece, but I've definitely gotten to lay out some of those extremely low contrabassoon notes and let it rumble. I think there's some good ones in Holst and you know, what's the Death and Transfiguration that has the contrabassoon hold the low C for all great eternity during the transfiguration portion of
like
it.
32 measures of low C.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh god.
It's really rumbly. And it takes an incredible amount of air.
I was just about to ask that. I'm sure that is tough.
It is tough. You have to monitor yourself and breathe in hopefully graceful places where you don't leave a giant gap of sound, you know, missing while you take in another big breath and initiate the note again.
Yeah, you just wait for the trumpets or somebody else to come in, grab a breath while everybody's paying attention to them, and then you're back in and nobody knows you've been gone.
Who knows? Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately the contrabassoon or bassoon are not, they're not like the bagpipes. You don't have a built-in reservoir of air.
Right.
Although I think people have tried to create one for some wind instruments when people come up with whimsical, creative ideas to try to keep the tone going. I think that's
And
where the
Rosalind, you
bagpipe came
touched
from.
on it just a little bit, but was there anything that you wanted to add about, you know, some of the different genres and things that you're endeavoring in now that kind of what was the transition into that? I know you mentioned a little bit about the bagpipes that just kind of floated into your world, but
Right.
yeah.
I'm not certain. I feel like the Celtic music is something that really speaks to me and always has, and so has classical music.
Right.
I've always had an affinity for kind of more folk style music or Baroque music, especially things that are a little bit more like in training or trance-like, that have repetition, but like great layers of intricacy within that. And I think Celtic music really can have that level of like, you really get in the zone with it, and it's really mesmerizing. I think that's the word I'm going for, is really mesmerizing. But there's all this room for the player to put in levels of intricacy and ornamentation and variation, so that you have the chance for small amounts of improvisation in it. And I feel that that's very kind of personal and creative, and you can definitely have your own sort of signature style within it. I know Emmalee was saying how like finding your voice in your own music is something, and I think that I can use Celtic music a little bit. There's some of that where I can find my own musical voice in a certain way with the instruments that I play.
Right, it's not so prescribed to you.
Yeah, there's tradition, and then there's like kind of working within those bounds. You have a lot of flexibility available to you. The outside listener might not know that it's there, but there's more to it than meets the eye in a lot of ways. And that to me is really fascinating. And as a bassoonist, where the level of complexity of the instrument is so high, I don't feel like folk music is any less interesting to me. But I've always been someone too who just really enjoys methodical action. I love crafts and knitting, and I love playing scales and etudes, and learning, two-part reels. Like, they all seem to go together somehow.
That's wonderful. Well, I have to address the elephant in the room like I do for all of these, and that is, we're all at home, we're all dealing with these crazy times, and as musicians, obviously this time has affected everybody quite a bit. Obviously we're not on the stage right now and not in a concert hall, but I am sure that does not mean that creativity has gone down at all. So I'd love to just hear kind of what you all have been up to since this whole thing began last March. If this has given you any time to kind of delve into things that maybe you didn't do before, or didn't have time to do before, or just kind of what that time's been like, and maybe shed some positive light on this whole thing, if that's possible. So anybody who wants to start? We want to start with you, Stephanie? Is that okay?
Well, my mom passed away, in the beginning of this. So I think that my experience is uniquely different. I just sort of went into a vacuum for a few weeks. So I can't say, I would say my creativity exploded in the garden. And I dug and dug all this. And I think Emilee's been over a couple of times. It's like hardly any grass left. And I planted all these pollinator things and put a bat house up, and then these butterflies and raising monarchs, and planted lots of food, and I just completely exploded with it. Over 110 plants, and each one of them I thought a zucchini plant would give me one zucchini. No, 10 or 15. So
you got a food forest going.
That's what happened to me. I think it was very therapeutic. And then after that, I decided, one of my students was saying, you do these monthly master classes. Why don't you do them twice a month? And I said, oh my gosh. And then they volunteered to host it. So I've been doing that since June, twice a month. So I give a class and people perform, and they wind up on YouTube. They're called tutorials. And we talk about music and the meaning of music. And I'm encouraging my students and teaching them how to project their emotions through cyberspace. I think it's really important that I thought it would take advantage of this, and maybe it's a creative idea about, when we perform and there's a room full of beating hearts out there, it's very different than when you're like here, in this kind of a situation, for example. And one of the times I was talking to them about loving, about it being about love, that we have to love the music we're playing. We have to love the composer, learn about them just like we would a best friend, like we would love a best friend. But most importantly, we must love our audience. And so I tried it out one time, and instead of thinking of loving the people that were at the Zoom class, I was thinking it was a tough time in our history here in America, and I was thinking about, well, we know there's some bad stuff going on, around the world, but I decided I'm going to think about all the goodness. There's so many more good people and wonderful people. And so I kind of experiment with the idea of really focusing on my love for humanity and putting in my music that way. So been exploring things like that in artistic listening, teaching people how to listen to music, not critically, but artistically and with our feelings and emotions. So that's kind of
That's definitely a positive. I'm so sorry that it started out as a very negative time, difficult time, and but that's absolutely beautiful. And I think that what you share is a sentiment I keep trying to remind myself of is, as humans, we're definitely going to make up for all this time that we're at home. And I think by the time we finally all get to gather in a concert hall or wherever that space is and get to hear and perform together again, it will be so appreciated and loved. And we'll finally get to know just really how important that is. Whereas before, maybe. So I think that's absolutely lovely. And if you wouldn't mind, Stephanie, either emailing me or putting in the chat the name of what you were just talking about that's on, you said it's on YouTube, is that correct?
It's really easy. You just go on, just YouTube, Amazon, my name's Stephanie Quinn, Asheville, and it'll come up there. Or my name, Amazon Music, violinist.
Okay.
It's pretty easy to. You can just do Stephanie Quinn, Asheville, Amazon. Everybody can remember that. But I'll put it in there if you like.
Okay, thanks, Stephanie. I know people would love to check that out.
This is what it looks like. That's the Sphinx. And that's me in front of the Sphinx right before I recorded.
Oh, wow.
All right.
All right. Anybody else? Emmalee, I'm going to pick on you again.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Stephanie. It's inspiring to hear you talk about that level of knowing how much goodness there is in the world. It's really beautiful. So I've been working on 2 primary projects during this time. I recorded an album of cello pieces in April, May, and I'd been improvising and writing some looping pedal cello pieces, and I've done that over the past like 10 years. So I was able to take some time to consolidate a lot of that material and really more thoroughly compose it. So I'm also a massage therapist. I'm not practicing right now, but I've been inspired by being a massage therapist. So the music is it's very relaxing, I would say, sort of dreamy, ambient. And so that's a little different for me because often a lot of my music is really infused with a lot of emotion. So there is emotion there, but it is a lot more just sort of like floaty, relaxing. So it was fun for me to have the intention to create an album like that. And my partner, Ben, has a recording studio in our house. So luckily I was able to just be here and record with him. And yeah, so that's out online on Bandcamp, and I'll share a link to that. And then the other major project that I've been working on has been this microtonal music that I talked about earlier. So my partner, in addition to being doing recording for folks, he also is a composer. So Ben Kiertman, I would definitely recommend looking him up and listening to some of his music. So he wrote this sort of series of songs, 7 songs, all in different just intonation tunings of his own design. So it's been really awesome for me to learn from him, you know, what are these different tunings, how to sing different microtonal notes, how to play different microtonal notes on my cello. And if you all aren't familiar with just intonation, so, you know, we as Western musicians play most everything is equal tempered, so an equal temperament. So we play with just 12 notes. But if you think about an artist, you know, they have all these colors that they can choose from. And what if an artist only had 12 colors to choose from? So you can think about just intonation, microtonality as really expanding the color palette of sound, of tones. And just intonation specifically is based on the harmonic series, or based on the way that strings and sound work. So if you cut a string in half, or if you play the harmonic at the halfway point of a string, it sounds a certain frequency. And then you divide the string up into these different fractions, and there are different tones that sound, and some of them sound different from an equal tempered note. So that's, yeah, just kind of a very brief what is just intonation. So it's been really cool for me to learn all that stuff. And so we've spent these last 6 months plus learning the songs and recording them. So we haven't released them yet, but in the next year or so, they should be out for people to hear.
We'll certainly make sure
Emmalee,
to share that.
I'm so excited that you're exploring pitch. It's one of my favorite topics. And
oh, cool.
About it, when I was in the pyramid, I tuned up to 440 with my tuner on my violin, but within 15-20 minutes, the violin went down to 432, and it just kept doing it. The acoustics, it kept making it go to 432. So I wound up singing at 440, and the violin was at 442. So sometimes you get those beats and stuff.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah, it's really fascinating stuff. Yeah.
And I'm sure I'm sure it's just like almost like completely retraining your ear in your brain. I mean, mathematically speaking, it's kind of, and correct me if I'm wrong, kind of like we learn 1 + 1 = 2. And then, you know, what if you really broke that down? I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah, it is.
I went to put my piano at 432, my upright, for a year, because that's where Brahms had kind of settled on the 432 pitch, and 415 was the tuning, which is today's G sharp, in much of the Baroque time. So I didn't want to go down that far, but I did go 432 on one of my pianos to see what that was like, and see what these things would sound like.
And Emmalee,
I mean, it's you just relax into it. You just say, okay, I'm going to accept this, and just breathe and relax and play it, and don't think about pitch, but just think about the feelings that you get when you're playing the Brahms or the romantic pieces. And or if you have one of those carbon fiber violins, I've got one of those, and I can tune that down to 415 and then play the Baroque, and they sound great on it. It's not so easy on a wood instrument because they're all, the bridges and everything is made so that it's going to go for 440 today. But those the carbon fiber ones, I've done that before. I played all the Baroque things at 415A. It's a trip.
Oh wow. Yeah, that actually that came up in last week's talk. When we were talking with the wind section, there was with some of the players from there. We got into this whole conversation about different tunings and the way that they have to adjust, and it's just crazy to me. I'm a pianist, so we don't. It's a little different. But Emmalee, quick question while we still are talking, just for a quick second. Carol McCullum was asking, what is a looping pedal? Because she didn't know what that was. If you wouldn't mind giving a quick description on what it does.
So I have a pickup on my cello, so I can plug my cello into an amp. So a looping pedal is like if you were to use an electric guitar or something, you can run the instrument through this pedal, and then it'll go to the amp. And the looping pedal specifically records a short section of whatever you're playing, and then it'll just loop it. So it just plays a small little section of music over and over again, and you can add layers to that. So that's, looping pedal.
Awesome. Thanks, Emmalee.
Yeah.
All right, Will and Rosalind, you two, what have you guys been doing in this past, what is it now, 9 months?
Well, I've sort of followed Stephanie's lead as far as getting outside, working in the yard. There are a lot of things I wanted to do that I hadn't gotten done, so the place had gotten pretty much overgrown. So I pulled out a lot of English ivy and chopped up a lot of stray invasive plants, and then I built some rock walls, put a little fern garden in, and enjoyed being able to do that without worrying about what was going to be like if I tried to play a concert at the end of the week. That kind of work is really hard on the hands, and so we have to be very careful of that. And here was, okay, I'm not going to get to play a concert for several months. I can do some of this work that needs to be done. And so I guess that was all the music I was making this last spring. But since then, I've gotten a friend of mine who's also involved with the gamelan. We've taken several lessons with a player out in San Jose area for kecapi suling, which is another Indonesian tradition. Kecapi is a kind of zither, and the suling is a little bamboo flute. And so between the two instruments, you can do pretty much what the whole gamelan orchestra is doing, but just by the selection of the patterns to be played on both instruments. So that's been another way of listening to the structure of that music, which has been kind of fun and interesting.
Fun. And I'm assuming have those lessons been virtual, Will?
Oh yeah. Yeah. So we've been struggling with all the wonders of Zoom.
Yes. And sometimes I've seen, that does also seem to be a theme where many people have mentioned that they've connected with other musicians and taken lessons from other people that they would have never even thought of connecting or being able to connect with prior to all of this. But now with the virtual world becoming more accepted and more of a part of our life, that it's actually kind of opened some doors in certain areas. So awesome. Rosalind, what have you been up to?
I wish I had been gardening. Now the exterior of my abode has stayed exactly the same, but hopefully I've been doing some good things on my interior. I've been really concentrating a lot on private teaching and lessons, and I've been connecting a lot with a lot of Scottish small pipe players, and big on teaching lots of new students during this time online, which has been really pretty great. It's been really wonderful to connect with some new people kind of all over the country. And I have some new students in Canada, and it's been lovely to connect that way. I've also been involved in a couple big online workshops where I've been an instructor and been doing a lot of music kind of creation and material writing and making recordings and just trying to get lots of teaching materials kind of up and running in ways that I've never had time to do before. And trying to like with my students to hopefully be an encouraging person to them that they can look to for support in their own music making. Because I know lots of amateur musicians and other, of course, professional musicians alike are struggling with motivation. And during this time, some people really are. Some people feel a great, incredible creative spark right now and are on fire. And others are feeling really down because they can't connect with any of their fellow musicians and don't really know what to do with themselves. A lot of Celtic players, the reason they play Celtic music is because it's a social outlet and a social instrument. So when they're not able to do that in the way they normally do, it can leave you feeling pretty rudderless. So I've tried to help motivate my students with kind of fun new projects and different tunes and creative ways to try to play together remotely. And that, those kinds of projects have been, I think, really helpful for me too, because it's giving me good direction in my teaching. It's something I really enjoy doing. I very much feel I'm a performer, but just as much a teacher. I think a lot of musicians feel that way. A lot of performers feel that way too, that they have these two aspects to what they do is sharing their love of the music with their audience through the performance, but then also to the people that also want to learn it themselves and to share that, the spark of it with them.
They very much go hand in hand.
They really do. They really do. And on that note, like I've got the opportunity myself to take lessons, kind of like Will was exploring some of what he does with gamelan some more. I took some very, very traditional Irish whistle lessons with a guy who's a friend of mine in Portland, Maine, who he is the image of the Irish musician hipster, if I may say. He's like very dapper and dresses a very particular way and only listens to recordings on his, like gramophone kind of device, and listens to these original recordings of Irish musicians that came from Ireland. And they're these first recordings that they got of these people before the great sort of resurgence of interest in Celtic music in the 50s and 60s. So it's like the pure stuff, like straight from the mouth, they say. So I took some lessons from him just to see what this style of music was all about. And I've also been dabbling in the Northumbrian small pipes, which is another kind of bagpipe. So I've gotten the chance to do some things I wouldn't normally get to do, studying those instruments and working with my students. So that's really what I've been pretty deeply into. I have lots of ideas for things I would like to do still. I feel like my creative juices are just kind of starting to get flowing.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're one of those people that that this time is allowed you to kind of delve into some different creative outlets that maybe you didn't have the time to do before. So that's always good to hear. And as we look forward to the day that the Asheville Symphony and symphonies in general and musicians all get to come back together to play, we've got our favorite question always, but it's a little different this week just because of the nature of the topic. And John Condren beat me to it. He asked, what different genres of music would you like to see the Asheville Symphony engage in? You can look at the question and answer to see some of the suggestions he wrote, but I'm just going to throw it out there. Maybe we'll even hear some genres that our viewers have never even heard before. So who's going to go? What comes
for
to
sure,
mind?
the John Cage 432.
We all know that piece is silence, right?
Well,
but it's not.
It's a perfect pandemic thing, you just go inside and you just feel and be aware of your surroundings in a way you've never been done. I think that would be a great opening piece for the first time we come back together.
Yeah, it would be hilarious.
It'd be very funny. You get to hear all the air handling intricacies.
Would be relevant though. I mean, John Cage was here one time, was in Black Mountain, and
That's right.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, what happened with that is that, that there was a woman in New York who was doing a movie about John Cage, and she someone had given her my album, and that's how Kay Larson came into my life, and she actually gave me the best reviews, and she said it's her favorite CD album, and you know, to listen to in the car on her long car rides, you know, back from home, back and forth to New York when she was working on the John Cage.
Oh, wow. All right, you got to give us some genres. I'm going to pick on you, Emmalee, because I'm taking notes during this, and Darko is as well during the ASO at home to give ideas for the future. Definitely taking note.
Well, on the microtonality and gamelan space, maybe some Lou Harrison, maybe some gamelan orchestra collaboration. That would be pretty amazing.
Yes, it would. It would be quite profound.
I love that idea. I mean, I'm being the other instrument interest guru nut person. I don't know, that's not the best way to describe it, but I would love to see more eccentric instruments featured as soloists with creative, modern, extra fantastically composed orchestral backing for that. So there's one piece that I was a part of a virtual recording project for, where I, you know, attempted to record myself playing the bassoon part with my headphones, listening to the backing track. But it was a Irish uilleann pipe concerto, based on, it was like a storytelling concerto of 10 movements that each told a journey of someone coming from Ireland in a boat to Newfoundland. And it's called the Brendan Voyage. And I was going to hear my friend Brian Bigley, uilleann pipe player, play it with the Asheville Symphony right as COVID was hitting. And I was like on the way, and they canceled the concert.
No.
But then I got to play in the virtual backing thing, so that was really fun. But I was thinking about that kind of music and how it pulls more genres in and other instrumentalists or things people haven't heard before. And that can be really expansive too. So I enjoy that, and can include other cultures in ways we don't normally get to include in the traditional symphonic setting. I think that can be really interesting and creative way to link people up.
Yeah. And what better place to do that than Asheville?
Right.
A very eclectic place. And the Asheville Symphony has definitely been known to branch out and definitely meld genres. And I think only more exciting places to go, right? So
absolutely.
Will, what are your thoughts?
I really don't know. There's so much good music,
right?
And there's so much good music in so many different genres. And it's interesting sometimes to bring them together, but it's also nice just to hear them. I mean, people still like to hear the Eroica Symphony, even though it's been played a lot and it's been recorded a lot, but it's still good music. On the other hand, there's other things that are being done that need a hearing. We need to have our ears expanded, our experience expanded by, by hearing some ways in which these different instrumental traditions or choral traditions might come together. So I don't know that I could select any one thing. I guess my hope is that there's just going to be more excitement to hear live music of any type when we're actually able to make it again, and that people will get together to support the musicians who are making it, but also to make music themselves. I think we've professionalized music so much in this country that it seems like it's okay if someone says, well, I'm not musical. But in most parts of the world, if you said you weren't musical, they'd look at you like you were crazy, like you said you didn't need to eat or you didn't need to sleep or something. Right. And for us, in many ways, many people's experiences with music is listening to it on the radio. I think people need to perform, and it's something that anybody can do. We need to get away from the idea that musical performance is only, or the musical ability is only the result of a gift. There's a lot of hard work involved for all of us. We weren't born playing bassoon or violin or cello. We had to learn it and practice it because we did it because we loved the experience of just working on it. And that, I think, can be available to anybody. They just have to find the right spot. And I hope that people get excited about making music of any kind when we can finally get together and do it together.
That's some really thought-provoking things you just said, Will, and I think some very inspiring thoughts. And I am right there with you, along with everybody else on this panel. I'm sure that we're hopeful, and I think that day will come. And I think that this time has caused many people to pick up paintbrushes or pick up an instrument they never thought that they would have time to touch. And I hope that does continue after all of this. And I never thought about it until you just said it, about the professionalism of music in this country. That is a very true statement. Well, it's 8 o'clock. It's a little over 8 o'clock, and I think that's a wonderful note to end on. No pun intended. Does anybody have anything else that they'd like to add before we say goodbye to everyone? Anything at all? No, we're good. Well, I just want to thank everybody that joined this evening to watch on this cold, freezing December 1st. And I want to thank all the panelists for taking the time to sit down and speak with me and speak with you all. And hope you all enjoyed it as much as we did and the viewers did. And in the meantime, please feel free to share with us anything that you all are doing that you'd like for us to share with our audience and our supporters. I know that they would be delighted to hear music and albums and anything that you all are working on. So with that, I'll say good night and thank you again.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you so much, everyone.